Hi there. Today I want to give you my top 5 tips for growing tomatoes and hopefully for growing tomatoes successfully. I've put them in order of when you're going to need to think about them, and hopefully you'll get some use from them. 5 minutes, talk about the tips, and let's see how we go. So tip number one is time of planting. Okay, they say the difference between a good gardener and a bad gardener is 2 weeks. And if you're anything like me, at the turn of the year you're desperate to get out in the garden, get some things growing inside, really get those green shoots coming out of the ground and making you think of spring. It's a big mistake if you plant your tomatoes too early. Okay, guidance is think about when early summer is in your area, think about when the nights are definitely frost free and the nights are a little bit warmer, and work 4 to 6 weeks back from that. And that might mean you end up in April. If you're lucky, you end up in March, but nonetheless, don't plant your seeds too early. Okay, if you've got a propagator, you may be able to bring those seeds on really quickly, but they're going to grow, they're going to get leggy, and if you haven't got the light and the space to keep them, then you're going to end up with weak, unsuccessful plants. So if you plant them later, you're still going to end up with a fantastic crop. In fact, you're probably going to end up with healthier plants. So if in doubt, hold off a bit. And if you can, stagger your planting so that you've got baby seeds coming on at the same time as you've got some of your adult plants, because that is going to make the difference between a nice spread out crop of production in the year. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2, okay, I plant my tomatoes in individual cells. I don't scatter them on a tray and prick them out, because you've got to look after those roots. The roots are one of the most important things for a tomato, and like many plants, in fact no plant likes having its roots disturbed. Some hate it, some tolerate it, but if you can avoid disturbing the roots of your tomatoes, all the better. And when you grow them in an individual cell, it means you run a much lower risk of disturbing the roots. Okay, when you put them on into their forever home, or if you put them into a larger pot, bury them up to these 2 leaves here, the baby leaves. It's called the cotyledon. Okay, and the cotyledon leaves are the marker point. Don't bury beyond, you can bury up to. Alright, now there's a really important thing about tomatoes and their roots, and we'll cover those off in a second. Point number 3, get your soil right. Okay, it's very easy to go out and buy a bag of peat-based compost, and that peat-based compost is going to be filled with nutrients, but those nutrients will be eaten very quickly by your tomato. They'll quickly disappear. Okay, and you're going to end up needing to feed them, and feeding makes life much more complicated when you're trying to balance out what nutrients they should and shouldn't have, depending on if they're in flower or if they're in fruit. So if you get your soil right, it will reduce the amount of food you need to have. So as per everything, go organic where you can, get some well-rotted manure if you can, incorporate that into the soil. If you've got good soil with a bit of sand, a bit of clay, a little bit of sort of solid material to it, that really helps. In fact, the most success I ever had with my tomatoes was growing them directly in the ground. In my polytunnel, I grow them in large fibre pots. Get your pots as big as possible for your tomatoes. The tomatoes will not complain about having too much space. Okay, and those fruits, they take energy. All right, and when you're growing beefsteak tomatoes, the more space they can have, the better. Okay, so let's talk about feeding and water. That is tip number 4. Little secret, maybe not a secret to some of you, but a tomato has got 2 sets of roots. It's got a tap root, which does the drinking, and then it's got a fine set of roots at the top, and that fine set of roots does the eating. Okay, so that's why I suggest you bury your tomato right up to the cotyledon, or the baby leaves, when you plant them on, because that maximizes your chances of the tomato making lots of feeding roots and getting access to those nutrients, which takes us into the world of watering. Okay, If you're flushing your soil or you're washing your soil heavily with water to give those plants a good old drink, that's fantastic. Your tomatoes are going to get their drink, but it means that you're sometimes washing the food away. Okay, so one technique is to actually alternate heavy drinks for the tomatoes, and you alternate them with much lighter feeding regimes, where if you're using a liquid fertilizer or you've got manure around it, you just give a very light sprinkling so the water can dampen the soil, but it doesn't wash away all the nutrients. You've got to remember that all those fine roots want access to those nutrients. So alternate your watering if you can, and don't constantly flush out the soil. All right. That's even more important if you're using bagged compost, grow bags, whatever it may be, because those things will lose their energy very quickly. And that would mean that you're going to need to start feeding those tomatoes sooner rather than later. I'll try and delay that as much as possible. Stick, if you can, with a general purpose fertilizer. Follow the instructions it says on the bottle. Okay, and as they grow into fruit and as they're getting more flowers, more fruit being set, then you can start thinking about using the fruit promoting or flowering promoting fertilizers, and once again stick with the instructions because it's really, really important. Okay, so that's point number 4, feeding and watering. Point number 5, a really important one, is about pruning and training your tomatoes. Before you train, before you prune, you've got to know what sort of tomato you've got. 2 main types of tomatoes. Bush tomatoes make a big bush, so plum tomatoes, cherry tomatoes are typically bush type tomatoes. You need to read what it says on the packet. And then there are cordon tomatoes, so beefsteak tomatoes and other types of tomatoes generally make cordons, which is a long central column, if you like, or cordon of tomato, and you prune out all of the little leaves that start to try and grow on the sides. You prune those out, so essentially you're making a single spike or single tree out of your tomato plant, whereas with a bush you're letting that go. Knowing what type of tomato you've got is really important because it will help you maximize your chance of fruiting. And when the tomatoes are setting fruit, when you've got good sets of tomatoes coming on, then you can start thinking about removing leaves from lower down, so the yellowing leaves, the leaves that are not really working anymore, you can get those out of the way to get some light, get some air to your plants to maximize the chances of ripening. So those are my 5 tips. When you plant, okay, bear that in mind. How you plant and potting those on, okay. The soil you use, rich, light, full of accessible energy. Think organic wherever you can. Lower the amount of liquid feeding if you can, because life can get complicated with that. Lastly, pruning and training, knowing the type of tomato that you've got. Follow those tips, and I wish you the best of luck with growing your tomatoes. Like the video, subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Feel free to add comments. I love to talk to the people that watch these videos and see if I've done something you disagree with, or see if I can give you any more additional advice. But nonetheless, let's get a chat going and see what we can do about having the best tomato harvest as possible this year. Best of luck.